Akash, please come and be
Just
seated.
sit with the team in the front row.
So you can begin.
Good afternoon to all of you. I have great pleasure in introducing Professor M.V. Rajiv Gowda and his team, consisting of Akash Satyavali, Sneha Elizabeth Koshi, Ashmi Sharma, and Ishan Krishna. They have produced a splendid report called Real State of the Economy 2025. Many of the facts mentioned in this report are conveniently buried by the union government. They are press releases, they are statements, completely ignore the facts. And with a few exceptions, the media does not get an opportunity to carry the truth about the economy. Therefore, Professor Rajiv Gowda's team decided to produce a comprehensive report on the real state of the economy. There is, of course, an unreal state of the economy, which is put out by the government every day, every hour. There is a real state of the economy. This report is well documented and well sourced. It runs to about 95 pages, but there is an executive summary of about 9 pages. I urge all of you to read the executive summary and report on that basis. Of course, your editors and sub-editors will delve deeper into a subject of their interest and go into the body of the report, and they can pull out and publish many more facts, many more issues can be highlighted, and many more evidence can be brought on record. Briefly, the economy is in a slowdown. That cannot be denied at all. However much the government may try to do that, the economy is a slowdown, and it is maybe falling up to 2% of the previous year's growth. The second important factor is there are no jobs. Youth employment is perhaps close to 40%. Among graduates, unemployment rate is close to 30%. There are no jobs. Despite the letters handed over from time to time by the Honorable Prime Minister, that jobs are being created. Those letters of appointment are filling jobs already vacant. They are not creating jobs. The third is wages have stagnated for 4 or 5 years, especially rural wages, agricultural wages, daily workers. Wages have stagnated for 4 or 5 years. In the meanwhile, inflation is raging. look at food inflation, education inflation, and healthcare inflation. All are in double digits. Food, education, and healthcare inflation are in double digits. While inflation has been raging for 2 or 3 years, and in many cases in double-digit inflation, yet the wages have stagnated. And finally, there's huge inequality. Nobody's denying that the upper crust of 1% is extremely wealthy. I concede even the middle class, the top 20 or 30% may be better off. But what about the remaining 70%? The population lives on about 100 to 150 rupees a day. That is 50% of India's population lives on about 100 to 150 rupees a day. There's huge inequality. And that gap between the rich and the poor is growing. And government has done nothing to address this inequality. Now we can go examine the reasons why we have come to such a pass. But a budget analysis of the last 6 or 7 years will show that the government expenditure on health, education, both higher education and school education, social welfare, and rural development has fallen year after year since 2017-18. Allocations for major welfare programs have fallen steeply over the last 7 to 8 years. With that brief introduction, I request Professor Rajiv Gowda to make a very, very brief PowerPoint presentation, and then we can take a few questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I just want to give you the key highlights of the report that Mr. Chidambaram has just released. That report will be shared with you immediately after the press conference, and we will also be sending you a soft copy of the report, of a Word version of the executive summary. Now, and I can also send you the highlights PPT if you wish. Anyway, I'm not going to repeat what he has already highlighted, but let's go ahead. So the key issue is what happened to growth. That is the title of our report this year. The unemployment crisis, Mr. Chidambaram has highlighted, and you can see that without repeating what he said, what we're going through is a phase of job destruction, job loss growth. Earlier, we used to be concerned about jobless growth. Now this is what we're facing. Our parents of India invest so much in their children's education. However, today, graduates face an unemployment rate of 29%. The more educated you are, the less your chances of getting a job. And manufacturing jobs have declined. People are moving back to the farm where they're underemployed. And women are badly hit. Next. This is just illustrating the education and job situation. Next, please. Now, growth, the theme of our cover, basically what you've seen over the last, ever since demonetization and GST, we've seen the economy slump. And this Modi slump, as you may want to call it, is now the new normal. This has become 6% or so as the average growth. At this rate, we are heading straight into what economists call the middle income trap. This means that the kind of opportunities that we were hoping to create, the demographic dividend that we are hoping to encash, all those are doomed. Essentially, we will be a stagnating middle-income country, underproductive and uncompetitive globally. Per capita income has been growing at 4.52% since 2014, since Prime Minister Modi took over, and our per capita income is now below that of Bangladesh. 34% of Indians survive on less than 100 rupees per day, and income inequality is worse than it was under the British. Next, please. Yeah, this is just the detail. It's there in the report. The other real challenge, next, is that incomes are stagnating, people's and household savings are dropping, and their debt levels are increasing. Household savings are now at a 47-year low. Consumption growth is at a 20-year low, and household debt has soared to a record 39% of GDP. Basically, the families of India are in deep distress. Next, manufacturing. The normal pattern of development is the move from farm to factory and then to services. India is experiencing a reversal of this particular pattern, and you all recall the Independence Day speech when Prime Minister Modi announced Make in India. And it's been a decade since that moment, and if you look at the targets, the target for Make in India was to increase manufacturing growth to 12 to 14% per annum. Since that period, it has averaged 5.8%. He wanted to increase the share of manufacturing in GDP to 25% by 2022. Last year, the share has remained stagnant at 15.8%. Number of jobs in manufacturing have come down by half between 2016 and 21. And he announced that he would create 100 million jobs in manufacturing by 2022. Instead, we have seen the workforce decline from 12.6%. You're all aware that even after that massive corporate tax cut that was delivered to the private sector, they have not had the confidence in the leadership of the economy, in the guidance that the government gives, and has therefore chosen not to invest. Without investment by the private sector, there are no jobs being created, and economic slowdown is very, very apparent. In the last financial year, 23 to 24, new project announcements have fallen by 21%. Exports used to be more than 25% of GDP under the UPA, under Mr. Chidambaram. Today, they're below 20% of GDP, and our import dependence on China has surged by more than 83% since 2019-20. FDI has been falling. In 2023, it had come down to 0.8% of GDP. That means the world also is losing confidence in India's economic management. And 21,300 high net worth individuals have left the country between 2022 and 2025. These are people who otherwise should have been investing here. Next, what about the poor? Well, welfare schemes across the board are under attack. Mr. Chidambaram talked about the cuts in health, education, and other welfare programs. Well, you know what the impact is. Chronic malnutrition affects 38% of India's children even today. There have been budget cuts to the National Food Security Act, to the PM Matruvandana Yojana, to Mahatma Gandhi, Manrega, and health allocation is now less than 0.27% of GDP. Manrega is the unkindest cut. It is supposed to be a demand-driven program. It is the right of people to get 100 days worth of employment, but not even 45, 50 days are being provided. A lot of people are being axed from the payrolls, and again, a large number of people are being kept out because of the glitches in the Aadhaar-based payment system. If a lot of the budget allocation that you see for Manrega is being used for previous year payments and is not actually the amount that is going to those who are in distress. Next, farmers are hurting. You see this in the borders of Delhi. Agricultural growth, after a blip, has fallen to 1.4% in 23-24. The old story, MSP according to Swaminathan formula, which was promised, has never been delivered. The Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana is benefiting the insurance industry and not our annadatas. And over 55% of farm families are in debt to the tune of nearly 1 lakh each. And more than 1 lakh farmers have committed suicide between 2014 and 23. Inflation is worsening. The cost, remember the thalinomics that one of our economic advisors had announced some years ago? Well, in the last year, the cost of a home-cooked thali has gone up by 10%, when wages and incomes are not going up. Excise duties on petrol and diesel. Over the last decade, they've increased by over 100% for petrol and 343% for diesel. This affects the entire economy and especially affects the poor who depend on these fuels for transport and for farm inputs, etc. And of course, the spectacular fall of the rupee over the last decade, and especially over the last year, from 58 per dollar in 2014 to more than 86 per dollar today. So this is going to make imports even more expensive at a time when there is so much global uncertainty. And finally, the last 3 sections of this report cover crony capitalism, the attack on various institutions, and NDA equals no data available. So, as you know, the banks, the public sector banks especially, have written off nearly 10 lakh crores over the last 5 years. This is your money and my money that is being just waved off, and people who had borrowed are getting away scot-free. The Adani Group, the government's favorite group, their debt has gone up by more than 1.1 lakh crore, and the substantial investments in these companies is from our own Life Insurance Corporation of India and the State Bank of India. One of our former deputy governors of the Reserve Bank, Viral Acharya, he has published a report showing that 5 groups are monopolizing 40 major sectors of the economy. So what you're seeing is concentration rather than dispersion and competition within the economy. What else when we talk about the weakening of institutions, the RBI has been squeezed and forced to give huge dividends to the government, so also public sector banks, public sector undertakings, which could have used these resources for additional growth. Further, you know that agencies have been misused left and right in the great extortion racket called electoral bonds. And that information all of you have seen after the Supreme Court decision. And finally, inconvenient data is constantly suppressed. For example, in 2017-18, the periodic labor force survey showed that unemployment was at a 45-year high. And as is typical of this government, they rejected it, they called the data flawed, and basically anything that reeks of bad news, instead of treating those as warning signs, the government just hides that data, rejects that data. Basically, the emperor has no clothes, the economy is in deep distress, and now request Supriya Srinath to speak to you about this and give you the highlights in Hindi. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chidambaram and Professor Gaura. आप सब लोगों को मेरा नमस्कार. अगले 48 घंटे में यूनियन बजट आना है और कल इकोनॉमिक सर्वे आएगा और हवाई बड़े बड़े दावे किए जाएंगे, लेकिन असलियत क्या है उसका संक्षिप्त विवरण मैं हिंदी में कर देती हूं. श्री चिदम्बरम ने आपको डिटेल्ड एक समरी अंग्रेजी में दी और प्रोफेसर गौड़ा ने आपको डेटा और तथ्यों के साथ, आंकड़ों के साथ ग्रोथ से लेकर नौकरी तक समझाया. लेकिन क्या यह सिर्फ आंकड़ों की बात करने की प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस है? क्या जब रियल स्टेट ऑफ इकोनॉमी की हम बात कर रहे हैं, और मैं संक्षिप्त में, बहुत ही छोटे संक्षिप्त उसमें आंकड़े जो बताए गए अंग्रेजी में, उसमें हिंदी पे बोल देती हूं, क्या यह सिर्फ आंकड़ों की बात है या इनके पीछे छिपे चेहरे, इनके पीछे कहानियां, इनके पीछे दर्द, इनके पीछे तकलीफ, इनके पीछे दिक्कतें झेलता हुआ एक हिंदुस्तान है? और उनके कुछ चेहरे मैं आपको यहां पर दिखा दूंगी। जैसा कि कहा गया, आज की तारीख में युवाओं की बेरोजगारी भयावह है। अगर आप स्नातक हैं, ग्रेजुएट हैं, तो 29% लोग बेरोजगार हैं। दिक्कत की बात यह है कि मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में एक बब्बर शेर बनाया गया था, मेक इन इंडिया का, वो कागजी शेर निकला और मैन्युफैक्चरिंग की नौकरियां लगातार गिरती जा रही हैं। मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का शेयर इकोनॉमी में 25% होना था, 2022 में वो महज 15% के थोड़ा सा ऊपर है। असलियत यह है कि बड़े बड़े हवाई क्लेम किए गए, लेकिन पिछले 10 साल में नरेंद्र मोदी के शासनकाल में जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट मात्र 6% थी, जो कि यूपीए के 10 साल के 7.6% से कहीं कम है। असलियत यह है कि बगल वाले बांग्लादेश का पर कैपिटा इनकम हमसे आज की तारीख में ज्यादा है। असलियत यह है कि कर्जे का बोझ हिंदुस्तान के आम परिवार झेल रहे हैं, किसान झेल रहा है, महिला झेल रही है, युवा झेल रहे हैं, बेरोजगार झेल रहे हैं। असलियत यह है कि गोल्ड लोन, अपने सोने को गिरवी रखकर आज लोग घर चलाने को मजबूर हैं, तो जो मंगलसूत्र छीनने की बात करते थे वो खुद मंगलसूत्र छीन रहे हैं। असलियत यह है कि कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स, जो बड़े बड़े पूंजीपति, बड़े बड़े उद्योगपति टैक्स देते हैं, वो आजाद हिंदुस्तान में पहली बार इनकम टैक्स से कम है, और हम और आप इनकम टैक्स और जीएसटी के तरह से टैक्स ज्यादा दे रहे हैं। गरीब आदमी का गला ज्यादा रेता जा रहा है। बहुत चरण वंदन करते हैं टीवी चैनल पर आकर, और अगर आप सामने उनके माइक लगा दीजिए, लेकिन हिंदुस्तान के पूंजीपति नरेंद्र मोदी जी की नीतियों पर विश्वास नहीं करते हैं। वो इन्वेस्टमेंट करने को, निवेश करने को नहीं तैयार है, और इसीलिए निवेश की जो दर है, इन्वेस्टमेंट का जो रेट है, वो लगातार गिरता गया है। असलियत यह है कि लाल आंखें दिखानी थी चीन को, लेकिन चीन के साथ व्यापार सबसे ज्यादा किया नरेंद्र मोदी ने, और 83% से ज्यादा ग्रोथ चीन से आए हुए, आयात किए हुए सामान की हुई। हमारे डोमेस्टिक कैपिटलिस्ट को, डोमेस्टिक उद्योगपतियों को तो नहीं भरोसा है। एफडीआई का जो एक झुंझुना बजाया जाता था वो भी थम गया है। विदेश के लोगों को भी मोदी जी की नीतियों पर, उनके शब्दों पर भरोसा नहीं रह गया, और इसीलिए एफडीआई भी गिर रहा है। असलियत यह है कि अगर लोगों के पास देश छोड़कर बाहर जाकर बसने का मौका है, बाहर जाकर निवेश करने का मौका है, तो असल में वो कर रहे हैं। 21,000 से ज्यादा हाई नेटवर्थ इंडिविजुअल्स ने इस देश की नागरिकता छोड़ दी है। कोई सरकार क्या करेगी? वो गरीबों पर ध्यान देगी, शिक्षा पर ध्यान देगी, स्वास्थ्य पर ध्यान देगी, वेलफेयर पर ध्यान देगी, सामाजिक कल्याण पर ध्यान देगी। लेकिन आपको सुनकर आश्चर्य होगा कि मोदी सरकार ने एजुकेशन का, शिक्षा का, स्वास्थ्य का, सामाजिक कल्याण का बजट लगातार पिछले 7 से 8 सालों में घटाया है। बातें ये जो भी कर लें, असलियत यह है कि किसान, 55% किसान कर्जे के बोझ के तले दबे हुए हैं। असलियत यह है कि महंगाई से लोग त्रस्त हैं। महंगा आटा है, महंगी दही है, महंगी सब्जियां हैं, महंगी शिक्षा है। रुपया जो कि दुबला होता जा रहा था जब नरेंद्र मोदी इस देश के एक मुख्यमंत्री थे, उनको 58 पे दिया गया था, श्री चिदम्बरम ने उनको 58 पे दिया था, वो 87 पर पहुंच गया है। असलियत यह है कि जो चंद पूंजीपति मोदी जी के जिगर के टुकड़े हैं, उनको सारी सुविधाएं मिल रही हैं, उनके लिए नीतियां बन रही हैं। अडानी ग्रुप का कर्जा करीब करीब 1 लाख करोड़ से ज्यादा का है। असलियत यह है कि जिन एजेंसियों से इस देश के लोगों को सहूलियत दी जाती, वो एजेंसियां बीजेपी की फ्रंटल बन के चंदा दो धंधा लो जैसे इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स चला रही हैं, और ये मोटे तौर पर आंकड़ों के साथ की कहानी है। मैं 2 मिनट में आपको ये कहानी 4 तस्वीरों से बयां करना चाहती हूं। यह तस्वीर सुमन की है। सुमन उत्तर प्रदेश के एटा की रहने वाली थी। 1.5 साल पहले उसके पति की मौत हो गई। उसके 6 बच्चे और उसकी एक बूढ़ी सास उसके साथ रहते थे। उसने 50,000 का कर्जा भी लिया घर चलाने के लिए। एक दिन जब वो आटा निकालकर रोटी बनाने के लिए गई तो सिर्फ 6 रोटियां बन पाई। 6 रोटियों का आटा था, 8 लोग खाने वाले थे। सुमन ने सल्फास खा के अपनी जान दे दी और जान देते वक्त अपनी बड़ी बेटी से कहा सबका ध्यान रखना। यह है कर्ज, यह है आर्थिक तंगी, यह है बदहाली। यह तस्वीर है झांसी के रामकिशन किसान की। 1-2 साल से उनकी फसल बर्बाद हो रही थी। उन्होंने कर्ज लिया था, उस कर्ज को वो अदा नहीं कर पा रहे थे, बेटी की शादी के लिए कर्ज लिया था। परेशान होकर और आगे स्थिति संवरती ना देखकर उन्होंने हताश होकर अपनी जान ले ली। ये 55% वो किसान हैं जो आज कर्जे के तले दबे हुए हैं। ये आंकड़े नहीं हैं, ये चेहरे हैं, ये असल कहानियां हैं, ये असल लोग हैं हिंदुस्तान के। यहां पर एक तस्वीर एक युवा दंपति की है, संचिता और हरीश। यह घटना जुलाई 2024 की है। हरीश ने एमबीए किया था, उसकी नौकरी चली गई, बहुत हाथ पैर मारे, नौकरी नहीं मिली। हरीश ने बनारस का रहने वाले थे, अपने घर में फांसी लगा के जान दे दी और जब यह खबर उसकी पत्नी संचिता को मिली तो उसने गोरखपुर में अपनी जान दे दी। यह बेरोजगारी है इस देश की, यह आंकड़ा नहीं है, यह चेहरे हैं, यह असलियत है। आर्थिक तंगी से 22,000 से ज्यादा लोग अपनी जान दे चुके हैं। और यह फोटो बस एक पुणे की ऑफिस की दिखा रही हूं आपको। 100 लोगों के फ्रेशर्स की नौकरी लगनी थी और लाइन का अंत नहीं हो रहा था। हजारों लोग 100 लोगों की लाइन में लगे हुए थे। यह पुणे की तस्वीर है। ये जो आर्थिक स्थिति आपको बताई और इसके बाद आपके सवालों का स्वागत रहेगा, ये जो आर्थिक स्थिति आपसे साझा की गई है, ये आंकड़े नहीं है, ये हिंदुस्तान की वो असलियतें हैं जो ये चेहरे बयां कर रहे हैं। वो बेबसी, वो दर्द, वो तकलीफ जिसको सुनकर नरेंद्र मोदी और उनकी सरकार के लोग कहते हैं हम लहसुन प्याज नहीं खाते, पकौड़े तल लो, हम 5वीं अर्थव्यवस्था बन गए, आप चांद पे पहुंच जाइए। अगर सुमन को आटे की तंगी से जान देनी पड़ रही है तो लानत है आपकी सरकार पर, लानत है आपके हवाई वादों पर। क्योंकि आपकी किताबों में मौसम बहुत गुलाबी है, लेकिन वो सारे दावे झूठे हैं, वो आंकड़े किताबी हैं, ये असलियत है। आपके सवालों का स्वागत है। Your questions are welcome. Please direct them to the architect of this report and of course Mr. Chidambaram. You want to just start this?
So, Chidambaram sir, you highlighted the state of the Indian economy. Considering that it's going to be, she's presented a series of budgets. And what are your expectations from the union budget this time around? Is going to be the second in the Modi 3.0?
It will be Modi 3.0. I actually called it Modi 2.1. I don't think there is a radical change from Modi 2. Unless they accept the realities of the Indian economy, they will continue to trudge on the same path, which is what I fear, which is what I criticize. Unless they change their approach to growth and development, and they adjust their fiscal and monetary policies accordingly, I'm afraid it'll be more of the same, but I don't wish more of the same. I hope that they will change, but if they have not changed until yesterday in their pronouncements, there is barely 48 hours for them to change.
Mr. Chidambaram, you were talking about, I hope they change and everything else, and what you have put out in your report very categorically says that there is stagnation in terms of salaries and everything else, and what is required for growth is something that it needs a transformational change. Having said that, we are told that the government is attempting a direct tax code, which the UPA also attempted to do so, and somehow didn't go forward. Now I think the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister are keen on simplifying things to a great extent. Do you think that this will help to give a new fervor to the middle class, which has been stagnating in the last, as per your report, and has been seen with growth really going forward, not going forward?
Direct taxes are a small part of the economy. The number of people who pay income tax, which is what the direct taxes code is, the number of people who pay income tax is about 8 crore or so. And out of them, little over 5 crore file nil tax returns. So the direct taxes code really applies only to about 3 to 4 crore people. I welcome a direct taxes code. We attempted, Mr. Pranam Mukherjee attempted, but it failed. Failed because the BJP leaders in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha told me that they have no appetite for any more reform. This is in 2013-14. I'm quoting the words, we have no appetite for any more reform. And if the Dr. Manmohan Singh government brings major reform bills, we're not going to support it. The direct taxes code could not have been passed without the opposition support at that time, because the government did not have an absolute majority. The Congress did not have an absolute majority in both houses. So I will welcome the attempt to introduce a direct taxes code, but if the direct taxes code is going to be a similar exercise like the so-called IPC, CRPC, Indian Evidence Act revisions, it's a waste of time. Because as you know, 90 to 99% of the old 3 laws were cut and pasted into the new law. If the present Income Tax Act is going to be cut and pasted 90 or 95%, it's a waste of time.
क्या इनमें ये भी पॉइंट्स हैं या कोई सजेशन है जो गवर्नमेंट को बताए कि इससे हम लोग ओवरकम कर सकते हैं इन सिचुएशन से? क्या ऐसा भी है इन बुक्स में?
Are there any suggestions? देखिए ऐसा है, इसका जवाब मैं चाहती हूँ प्रोफेसर गौड़ा दे, लेकिन आपसे सिर्फ ये बताना चाहते हैं, सबको पता है कि असलियत क्या है इकोनॉमी की। सरकार आंख पे पट्टी बांध करे, उनको भी पता है, लेकिन वो डॉक्टर है जिसके पास जब आप जाकर बताते हैं कि मेरे पेट में दर्द है, तो वो मानने को ही तैयार नहीं है। जब वो समस्या को मानने को तैयार नहीं है तो समाधान कैसे मिलेगा? पर प्रोफेसर गौड़ा इस पर आई थिंक ज्यादा डिटेल्ड।
Our job is to tell the truth about the economy and to lay out the facts. The government's job, that's why they've been elected, is to actually act on the facts and find solutions. If you want solutions, look at our manifesto. They've already done that. They've taken our apprenticeship program and turned that into some version of an internship program. So we have lots of suggestions for how to improve the economy. It's there in our manifesto. They have been taking some of them. They're welcome to take more in the interest of the people of India. But most importantly, let this report open their eyes to the reality and to the human tragedies that Supriya Srinath so eloquently elucidated in front of you.
So you said that there could be a 2% drop. So you said that there could be a 2% drop in the GDP levels.
I said there has been.
There has been a 2% drop. So going forward, do you also fear that the economy could go into recession? And how do you look at the government's claims that it is one of the fastest growing economies and so on?
The economy will not go into a recession. I've explained that many times. Even if there's no government in India, we will grow at between 4 and 5%. Because the farmers, the workers, the small industries continue to produce food grain and other things and services. India's economy will not go into a recession. question is how much more, how much higher than the 4 to 5% can the government's policies make. This government's policies added about 1 to 1.5%, maximum of 2% to the inherent growth rate. But that's not sufficient. I pointed out in one column that we are indeed the fastest growing economy in the world. But please remember, growing at 2.7% last year, the US added $787 billion to GDP in that 1 year. So 2.7% adds $787 billion. China grew last year at 4.9% and it added $895 billion to its GDP. At 4.9, it adds 895 billion. We are growing at a faster rate. There's no doubt about that. But we add only 256 billion to our GDP because our base is low. We are 1/5 the size of China. So don't compare the growth rates. Compare the addition to the GDP. Growth rate is important, but the addition to the GDP, and is the gap narrowing or widening? The numbers I've given you, if China adds 895 billion a year, US adds $787 billion a year, and we add $256 billion a year, the gap is growing.
So when Congress talks about the economic crisis, when Congress talks about the economic side, yeah, an argument comes from the opposition side, be it the BJP or the other parties, is that if so my question is basically when Congress talks about the economic slowdown and everything, an argument that comes from the opposition side, from the BJP, is that if you have such experts from the Congress side, why not work on the Himachal Pradesh government? Why not talk about the physical dip that is going on in Himachal Pradesh? So what is Congress doing in that?
They're saying that the BJP says that if you have such great economists, why don't you work in Himachal Pradesh where things are falling? But that's not true actually. But
we are talking about India's economy. Fiscal policy of India is not decided by a state government. Monetary policy is not decided by the state government. Direct taxes are not decided by the state government. GST, state governments have a role, but it's overwhelmingly weighted in favor of the central government. Therefore, we are talking about the national economy, India's economy, and you turn around and repeat their question, why don't you work on Himachal Pradesh? Himachal Pradesh is not an independent country.
So in last 10, 11 years, unemployment has been one major issue that opposition has been raising. As a former finance minister, what do you think, what's wrong with the government's approach in terms of addressing this issue? And any suggestions that you would like to make to the government of India to address this issue?
If I make a suggestion, it will be shot down. So the best suggestion is not to make it.
An extension to that question on unemployment, Mr. Gora, because it's one of the issues that you've red flagged in your report. Could you highlight the particular areas or the areas of concern where the unemployment slump is more? And also, you also come from Bengaluru. So the Indian government is talking about digital transformation and how it's going to peg up the economy and employment. So how is the economy faring on that front as far as employment is concerned?
So when you look at the various sectors of the economy, you see that more growth of jobs is happening in agriculture. Now, agriculture generates just 15-16% of overall GDP, has to support nearly 50% of the population. So this is a very unproductive or underproductive allocation of people and resources. Okay? What we need is to shift people from agriculture to manufacturing. So there, the micro, small and medium enterprises, the small businesses, the small firms, they were all destroyed either by demonetization or by the way GST was implemented. Now you're starting to see single operations picking up a little bit, and it'll take some time for them to revive. They are actually potential job creators, but this government hasn't shown the kind of concern and investment that's required there. Where they've tried to create production-linked incentives, except for big companies like Apple that have come in here, you import the components, you assemble here and you export. You're not doing any extraordinary value added. So while there is a uptick, it's not enough. Now when you talk about Bengaluru and you talk about the digital economy, we are on the verge of revolutions. You're looking at artificial intelligence, which can change the nature of jobs going forward. Is there anything, can we expect anything in this budget that will be proactive and farsighted and allow for training of our youngsters so that they are ahead of the game? You're seeing China, literally shattering the US's dominance in the domain of artificial intelligence just in the last few days. So basically, this is a government without a clue. And whatever, as Mr. Chidambaram pointed out, the people of India are keeping the economy humming. What you need is sustained 8% and above growth rates like you had during the UPA era for all of us to see, inclusive growth, more opportunities, more jobs, and a chance for our children to have better lives than us. That is the challenge. And you're not seeing it in this government. Instead, so what the government should do, for example, this extraordinary petroleum taxes, that is one area that they could lower a little bit. They've been covering the fiscal deficit substantially by squeezing each one of us. Right? If they were to leave more money in our pockets, then consumption can pick up, growth can pick up, jobs can pick up. That is not something these people are willing to do. Instead, what you see is more allocations towards cronies and the rest of us in the hands of God.
I would like to add something to this, just for people right here. मुझे बहुत खुशी है कि आज अर्थव्यवस्था पर आप लोग इतने सारे उत्सुक सवाल पूछ रहे हैं. आप सब जानते हैं असलियत क्या है, आप देखते हैं असलियत क्या है सड़कों पर, आप वो सवाल पूछ रहे हैं. लेकिन आपके जो साथी प्राइम टाइम शोज करते हैं, डिबेट्स होते हैं, मैंने तो एक डिबेट महंगाई पर होते हुए नहीं देखा. मैंने एक डिबेट इस पर होते हुए नहीं देखा कि आईआईटी बॉम्बे में 34% लोगों का प्लेसमेंट नहीं हुआ. मैंने डिबेट होते हुए नहीं देखा कि किसानों की एमएसपी नहीं है, उन पर इतना कर्जा है. मैंने डिबेट होते हुए नहीं देखा कि हाउस होल्ड सेविंग्स 50 साल में अपने सबसे निचले स्तर में है. ये असलियत है हिंदुस्तान की. डिबेट किस पर होगा? कहीं पर खुदाई चल रही है, फलाने ने कुछ कह दिया, ढिमकाने ने कुछ कर दिया. मेरा अपना मानना है सरकार असलियत से भाग रही है, सरकार मुंह मोड़ रही है, क्योंकि असलियत उनके लिए दिक्कत तलब है. लेकिन इस देश का जो चौथा स्तंभ है, जो मीडिया है, वो भी मुद्दों से भागकर मुद्दों से ध्यान इसलिए भटका रहा है क्योंकि सच जो सामने आएगा, जो ऐसी रिपोर्टें हैं जिसमें यह सच कैद है, वो रिपोर्टें असहज करती हैं सरकार को. मैं आप में से बहुतों के न्यूज चैनल पर जाती हूं और वहां पर जब मैं तथ्य और आंकड़े रखने लगती हूं तो तुरंत डिबेट को दूसरी तरफ मोड़ दिया जाता है या ब्रेक ले लिया जाता है. तो मुझे लगता है कि मीडिया जो 2014 से पहले अर्थव्यवस्था पर उत्सुकता दिखाता था, सवाल पूछता था, डिबेट करता था, कटघरे में खड़ा करता था, इस प्रेस रूम के बाहर निकलकर भी ऑन स्क्रीन यह काम जरूर होगा. Do you want to answer any other questions other than this?
What other questions?
Ask. We want to stick to this report today.
So what is the source data based on which this report is?
This data is sourced often from government data, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, World Bank, media reports, everything that is in Press Information Bureau, this is all publicly.
Many of the footnotes give the source. Footnotes give the source.
On every page.
Just a moment. For example, it says economic survey, NSSO survey, Ministry of Statistics. It also gives the Times of India as a source, but I hope one of you represent the Times of India and you don't disown your source. Therefore, the source is given in several footnotes, and I can count several footnotes in each chapter. So it's not as though we have written this report, or Professor Gowda's team has written this report without acknowledging and indicating the source.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you.